Tonight, I'm going to tell you a set of true scary stories about ordinary places that turned quietly, slowly wrong. Before we start, hit that subscribe button and subscribe to the channel so you can stay close while we walk through the dark together. The first story was sent to me by a former overnight worker at a massive 24-hour store on the edge of a small town, the kind of place you stop at for snacks on a late drive and never think about again. But for Daniel, it became a place he still refuses to even drive past years later because some buildings don't like being watched after midnight. He took the job because it was simple, steady money, and the store was always strangely empty at night, which he thought meant he could just stock shelves, zone out with his music, and kill time until the sun came up. On his first night, the manager, a tired woman with deep circles under her eyes, gave him a key card, a flashlight, and a laminated sheet of rules, like it was a hotel instead of a grocery store. At first, he thought it was a joke, guidelines someone made to make new hires nervous, but the manager's expression never changed, and her voice stayed flat as she read them to him. Rule 1. At midnight exactly, all music must be turned off. Even if you're wearing headphones, pause them. The store must be completely silent between 12 hours and 1 hour a.m. Rule 2. If you hear the intercom click on during that hour, ignore whatever you think you hear and do not look at the ceiling speakers. Rule 3. The security monitors in the office will sometimes show aisles that don't exist. Do not try to find them. Rule 4. If you notice a customer whose face you can't quite focus on, walk to the nearest staff-only door and stay there until they leave. Rule 5. And she looked at him a little longer when she said this. If you hear someone knocking from the inside of the freezer, do not open it unless you see a coworker key card pressed against the glass. He laughed. Because what else do you do, but she didn't. Sign here, she said, tapping a line at the bottom of the rules. And when he hesitated, she added, Look, you'll be fine as long as you don't treat this place like any other store. It's not. So he signed. That first night, nothing happened. The music went off at midnight, and the silence felt heavy and awkward, but nothing else. He pushed a cart full of canned soup down aisle 9, checked dates on labels, and told himself the rules were just corporate weirdness to keep them focused. Or maybe some superstition the older workers played along with. The second night, the intercom clicked on at 12:17. It was a soft little pop and crackle that made the hairs on his arms rise, the way they do when you suddenly realize you're being watched. He froze with a box in his hand, staring up at the black speaker in the ceiling, and in that thick silence, he heard something like breathing, faint and close, like someone had leaned right into the microphone but forgotten to speak. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, then clicked off. He spent the rest of the hour avoiding every speaker he could see, pretending not to notice that they seemed to follow him, that no matter where he walked, one of them hung just at the edge of his vision. By the third night, he knew something was wrong with aisle 13. In the daytime, it was just seasonal stuff, plastic pumpkins and cheap decorations. But after midnight, the lights there always seemed a little dimmer, and the shelf tags never matched what the scanner said. He'd stack boxes there and come back 10 minutes later to find the cart empty and the shelves arranged in a way he didn't remember doing. He told himself he was just tired, that the overnight schedule was messing with him, but the excuses felt thinner each night. One shift, around 12:40, the intercom popped again. This time, the sound was clearer, like someone had adjusted the volume. "Daniel?" a voice whispered, high and distant, almost like breath moving over the microphone instead of an actual sound. He dropped the box he was holding. It hit his foot, but he barely felt it. He knew, absolutely knew, that no one else was in the office where the controls were. His only co-worker on duty, a guy named Reggie, was across the store in the loading bay, and he never used the intercom because he preferred texting. "Daniel, can you come to aisle 13? The voice said, still too close, too soft, not quite right, like a voice heard underwater. The rules flashed through his mind. Ignore whatever you think you hear. Do not look at the speakers. He stared straight ahead at the shelves and waited. After a few seconds, the intercom clicked off again. Somewhere far behind him, a cart squeaked softly, the way it does when someone pushes it slowly, when one wheel is just slightly off. When he turned, the aisle was empty, but the squeak continued, moving away from him, turning a corner, fading. He should have quit then, but he needed the job. Needed the paycheck, and the mornings made it all feel silly again, like a bad dream that melted under the sun. If you're still listening at this point, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who loves creepy stories, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss when a new one comes out. Because the nights in this place only got stranger from here. About a week into the job, he was restocking the freezer, the walk-in unit at the back that always felt a little too cold, even for what it was. The vents hummed, his breath fogged in front of him, and he moved quickly, stacking boxes, wanting to get back into the relatively warmer store. As he turned toward the door, he heard it. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate, from somewhere behind the stacked boxes of frozen vegetables. It wasn't the metal door. It was deeper inside the room. He froze, his fingers going numb in the air. The knocks came again, this time followed by a sound that made his stomach clench, something like the low scrape of a palm sliding along metal. "Reggie!" he called out, because the brain will always reach for the most normal explanation, even when you're cornered. No answer. Then faintly, "Dan, cold in here. Open up." It was almost Reggie's voice, but not quite. The tone was wrong, stretched, like someone trying on a voice they hadn't used in a long time. He stared at the nearest metal door panel, at the small square of fogged glass in front. No keycard, no shadow, just his own reflection, pale and wide-eyed. He backed out of the freezer, keeping his gaze on the glass until the door swung shut, muffling one last soft knock that seemed somehow disappointed. He told Reggie about it later, halfway expecting him to laugh, to admit it was a prank, but Reggie just shook his head and showed him his keycard on a lanyard. "If you ever see mine pressed to the glass, you open it," he said. "But only if you see it. Sometimes it sounds like people stuck in there. That's not us." After that, the store stopped pretending it was normal. Aisles on the security cameras would bend in ways the actual building didn't. Corners that curved into darkness where there should have been cleaning supplies. Sometimes the cameras would show customers standing perfectly still at the end of an aisle, facing the camera. But when he walked there in person, no one was there at all. One night, he made the mistake of staring at a blank screen, trying to see if anything would move. The longer he looked, the more he realized the static wasn't static at all. It was tiny shapes, like a crowd seen from a huge distance, shifting, all their heads tilted toward where he sat in the office, as if they knew he was looking. He stopped checking that monitor after that. The last night he ever worked there, he broke a rule. It wasn't a big rule, not like opening the freezer, but it was enough. It was a busy evening before midnight, a rare rush of customers, and with the noise of carts and distant chatter, he forgot about the music. It was 11:58, then 11:59, then 12:01, and the playlist in his earbuds kept going. The song was loud, upbeat, almost obnoxiously cheerful, and he was halfway through straightening a display of cereal boxes when he felt it. A pressure, like the air itself had just leaned close. Every hair on his arms rose. The music in his ears crackled, distorted, and the singer's voice warped into a long, low tone that crawled under his skin. His phone glitched, the screen going dark as the sound stretched into something that didn't belong. Then the earbuds went silent. He pulled one out. The store was utterly still. No humming refrigerators, no faint whir of the vents, nothing. The silence was complete, so heavy it almost rang in his ears. That was when the overhead music system, which hadn't worked for years according to his manager, clicked on with an old, gentle static. Through the speakers, a soft melody began to play, distant and scratchy, like a recording from a forgotten time, some slow waltz that didn't match this place at all. He looked at the nearest speaker and caught himself just in time, jerking his gaze away to stare at the floor instead. That was when he noticed the footprints. They were faint, just slightly darker impressions on the gleaming tiles, starting from nowhere in the middle of the aisle and leading slowly toward him. They appeared one by one, as if an invisible person was walking calmly in his direction. Step, pause, step. They stopped about 3 feet in front of him. He couldn't see anyone, but the air was colder there, a little dense, like standing in front of an open door in winter. The music from the ceiling slowed, the notes drawing out too long, like the song itself was being pulled into something hungry. "We like it quiet," a voice whispered just above his head, not through the speakers, but from the space between them and him, close enough that he could feel the shape of the words in the air. That was the moment he dropped his phone, abandoned his cart, and walked out. Not ran, because something in him knew running would be a mistake, but he walked as calmly as he could, straight to the front doors. The automatic sensors didn't react at first. For a horrible second he thought they wouldn't open, that whatever was watching would decide to keep him, but then the glass doors slid aside with their usual sigh. The moment the night air touched his face, the music cut off. The silence behind him went back to HVAC hums and distant refrigeration noise, just another normal store at night. He never went back. The second story came from a woman named Lena, who thought she'd finally found the perfect apartment after years of moving from one cramped place to another. The building was old, but recently renovated, tucked away on a quiet side street in a city where silence was rare. The rent was suspiciously affordable, but she chalked it up to luck, timing, maybe just a landlord who'd gotten tired of vacancies. On move-in day, the property manager, a soft-spoken man with neatly pressed clothes, handed her 2 sets of keys and a folded sheet of rules just like Daniel had been given, only these ones were different, tailored to a home instead of a store. The first few were normal enough. No loud music after 10, no pets without permission, take trash out on schedule. Then her eyes caught on some that weren't normal at all. After midnight, do not look directly out of the windows facing the courtyard. If you hear knocking from the walls between 2 and 3 a.m., do not respond. If your doorbell rings during that hour, it is a mistake. No one is allowed to visit you between 2 and 3 a.m. She frowned and asked if it was some kind of joke. The manager only smiled a little too politely and said, "You'll find the building is very peaceful if you follow the guidelines, Ms. Reyes. We've had this place a long time. We know what keeps it calm." The first week, she felt more at home than she had in years. The apartment had high ceilings, big windows, and a strange but pleasant smell like old books and rain. Her neighbors were quiet. She could hear soft footsteps above sometimes, someone walking a steady, slow path from one end of their unit to the other, back and forth, but never any voices. The courtyard was pretty in the day, a small square of cracked stone and potted plants with a fountain that never seemed to run but was always damp. At night, she kept the curtains drawn, more out of habit than fear. But curiosity is patient. One night, around 12:30, she woke up for no reason, the way you sometimes do when your body senses a change you can't explain. The room felt off, like the shadows were a little thicker than usual. She lay there listening. The building was quiet. No pipes, no fridge noises, no distant music from other apartments. Just the hush of a place holding its breath. Then she heard it, a soft murmur, like several voices speaking at once, low and overlapping, drifting up from the courtyard below. The rule not to look out the windows flashed through her mind, but rules feel flexible when you're half asleep and annoyed. And the sound was bothering her. She slid out of bed, padded to the window, and with just 2 fingers, parted the curtain the tiniest bit. At first, she thought the courtyard was empty. There were no people, no shapes by the fountain. The only light came from the pale glow of the security fixtures on the walls, but the shadows on the ground were wrong. They were too many, shifting slowly, like a crowd moving in place. As her eyes focused, she realized what made the murmur so strange. It was coming from the shadows themselves. A slow coil of sound rising like steam, phrases she couldn't quite catch, words that slipped away whenever she tried to make sense of them. And then, as if they sensed her, the shadows closest to her window stretched. They didn't move like normal shadows, tethered to a body. They reached, lengthening along the cobblestones, inching toward the wall beneath her unit. The murmur sharpened, like 1,000 whispers drawing breath at the same time. She dropped the curtain and stepped back. The room felt colder. For a few seconds, she expected something to tap against the glass, a hand or worse, but nothing did. Instead, the murmur faded, drawn back down into the courtyard, and the building slowly exhaled. The next morning, the property manager casually asked how she was settling in, his eyes lingering on hers just a bit too long, as if he already knew what she'd done. She lied and said everything was fine. "Good," he said. "Just remember the rules. The building has routines." A few nights later, the knocking started. It was exactly 2:07 a.m., according to the glowing numbers on her bedside clock, when the first 3 taps came from inside the wall behind her headboard, gentle but deliberate. At first, she thought it was plumbing or an old pipe, until the knocks repeated with the same rhythm. 3 slow taps, pause, 3 slow taps. She sat upright in bed, trying to remember if she'd ever heard anything about old buildings needing time to settle, but the sound was too precise. Someone, or something, was knocking from the other side of the wall. She remembered the rules. Do not respond. That was the hardest part, because every human instinct tells you to do something when you hear a sound meant for you. Tap back, speak, call a friend. She did nothing. The knocks continued for almost 10 minutes, steady and patient, then stopped all at once, like whoever was there had given up or moved on. The next morning, she checked the floor plan on the building's website. According to the layout, the wall behind her bed divided her apartment from the hallway, not another unit. No one should have been standing there at 2 a.m. at all. The final rule she broke wasn't entirely her fault. She had a friend, Mariah, who'd been nagging her for weeks to see the new place. They worked opposite schedules, and one night the only time Mariah could come by was late. "I'll swing through after my shift," she texted. "Should be there around 2. The exact hour the rules forbade. Lena typed out several different responses, trying to think of how to explain that she couldn't accept visitors between 2 and 3 a.m. without sounding ridiculous. In the end, she asked her to come earlier. Mariah never replied. Midnight rolled past, 1 o'clock. By 1:45, Lena told herself her friend had just gotten busy, that she'd text tomorrow and they'd reschedule. At 2:03, the doorbell rang. It was a single, clear chime that echoed through the quiet apartment. Her phone lit up on the table. No new messages. She stared at the front door from the opposite end of the hallway. The peephole, a tiny dark circle, seemed larger than it should, like an eye watching from the other side. "It's just Mariah," she whispered to herself, stepping closer. But the part of her that remembered the rules screamed to stop. The bell rang again, followed by 3 gentle knocks, the exact same pattern she'd heard in the wall. Her hand hovered over the doorknob. "Lena, it's me," a voice called softly from the other side of the door, and yes, it sounded like Mariah, tired and amused. But there was something off, a wrong note humming underneath, like 2 voices layered slightly out of sync. The air in the hallway felt thicker, as if the building itself was leaning in to hear what she'd do. She backed away inch by inch until her shoulders hit the far wall. "Come on, open up!" the voice called again, still gentle, still just on that edge between familiar and wrong. Her phone buzzed. For a crazy moment, she almost ignored it, too focused on the door, but the insistent vibration snapped her out of the spell. She snatched it up. A new message from Mariah, time-stamped 1:58 a.m. "Hey, sorry, I'm not gonna make it tonight. My boss kept me late and I'm dead on my feet. Rain check?" The doorbell didn't ring again. Whatever waited on the other side seemed to realize she wasn't going to break the rule. After a few long minutes, the air slowly lightened. The apartment exhaled, and the building went back to being just old and creaky instead of hungry and listening. Some places, she realized, only stay peaceful because everyone agrees to pretend certain hours don't exist. She still lives there, but she never looks out into the courtyard after midnight. She never answers the door between 2 and 3 a.m., and she never, ever taps back when the walls knock. Remember, the stories you've heard tonight came from people who thought they were just going about their normal lives in normal places. And if you want to keep exploring the strange edges of those ordinary moments with me, make sure you've subscribed, liked, shared, and turned on all notifications so you're here the next time we step into the dark together. Because some of the scariest stories are still waiting in the places you think you know.